Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to Threadbare Reviews. For today's topic, I've decided to go off the beaten path a bit and have a look at a book that a lot of people are aware of, but not many people have read. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was the first of the Oz books published by L. Frank Baum, and it first came out in the year 1900. About the author. Lyman Frank Baum was born in 1856 in a small town called Chittenango, located right in the middle of upstate New York. But while the town was small, the Baum family was wealthy, thanks to Frank's father being a successful business owner. Frank, however, did not take after his father, and was instead more of a dreamer with a weak constitution. His parents tried to send him to a military boarding school to toughen him up, but he had a stress-induced heart attack 2 years in, and so that was the end of that. Instead, Baum became interested in writing and publishing, and with the help of a brother, he created some pamphlets and periodicals that they distributed to friends and family members. He also tried out a few different jobs like breeding chickens, selling fireworks, and working at a dry goods store. However, his true passion was for theater, and he enjoyed a moderate success as playwright and director, largely because his rich father built him a theater in a town he basically owned because of an oil boom. Baum would go on to marry Maud Gage, the daughter of a suffragist, and he later moved to what would become the state of South Dakota, where he would learn to both admire and despise Native Americans. At the same time, yes. And it wasn't an uncommon combination. But both his businesses in the area would fail after 3 years, and so in 1891 he and his family moved to Chicago, where he worked as a reporter and editor. In 1897 he wrote prose versions of Mother Goose rhymes, and after the book sold well he started a career as a children's author. 3 years later, Baum and his illustrator W. W. Denslow hit the big time with The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, an instant hit that was the best-selling children's book in America for 2 years straight. Baum would go on to write 13 sequels set in Oz, and being a theater kid at heart, he also helped adapt the book into a stage musical. A musical which only barely resembled the book and was instead an adult-oriented comedy full of topical humor. The 1939 film is a far more faithful adaptation, but Baum never saw it since he died in 1919 at the age of 62. The review. Dorothy is a young girl of unspecified age who lives on the high plains of Kansas with her Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. Kansas is a dry, gray place, but one day a cyclone picks up Dorothy's house with Dorothy and her dog Toto inside, and it drops her off in a distant land called Oz. Specifically, it drops her house on the Wicked Witch of the East, and the short inhabitants of the East, the Munchkins, rejoice at the death of their overlord. However, Dorothy just wants to go home, so the Good Witch of the North tells her to put on the dead witch's silver slippers and follow the road of yellow bricks to the Emerald City where the powerful wizard Oz lives. Along the way, Dorothy picks up 3 other supplicants, a scarecrow who wants a brain, a tin woodsman who wants a heart, and a cowardly lion who wants courage. They overcome a number of trials to reach the Emerald City, but when they visit Oz, he demands that they kill the Wicked Witch of the West before he will grant them their desires. So they head west, overcome more trials to kill the witch, and then return to Oz only to discover that he's not a wizard, he's a fraud from Omaha. Still, he gives the Scarecrow, Tin Woodsman, and Lion what they think they need, and he tries to help Dorothy return home by making a hot air balloon. But when Dorothy has to go find Toto, the tether snaps and Oz flies off on his own. So Dorothy and her friends head south to ask Glenda the Good Witch for help, overcome even more trials, and then she finds out that the silver slippers she was wearing this whole time can get her back in an instant. So she uses the slippers and goes home to her aunt and uncle. The end. I think I should start by saying that a lot of children's media can age very badly because the values and assumptions that were taught at one point in time are not the same as they are today. With this in mind, I would say that The Wonderful Wizard of Oz has aged quite well, all things considered. The Munchkins are described as short, but exactly as short as Dorothy, which means the reason they're short is to give Dorothy the freedom to be independent, instead of being a child in a world of adults. The Munchkins also call themselves uncivilized, which is why witches and wizards still exist in Oz, but their way of life is identical to that of rural America in the early 20th century. And even with the witches, there are some good and some bad, and Dorothy is reluctant to go after the Wicked Witch of the West just because other people tell her the witch is evil. It's only after the witch proves that she's evil that Dorothy defeats her. Come to think of it, there's also a lot of death in the novel, but it's never described in gruesome detail, and the only things that die are monsters and evil people. There is one bit, though, that's sketchy, and it's a story about an ancient sorceress who raises a boy to be her ideal husband. For whatever it's worth, she does wait for him to become an adult before marrying him, and it's a part of the story that could be removed from the novel without anyone noticing. As for taking the story on its own merits, something a bit clever I noticed about the novel is that each of Dorothy's companions already has the thing they want to ask Oz for. The Scarecrow comes up with all the ideas, the Tin Woodsman is compassionate to a fault, and the Lion is always courageous in the face of danger. What's clever about this is that the story never points this out directly, and so the kids who read The Wizard of Oz have a chance to figure this out for themselves. Something else I appreciate is that the story is very tightly plotted. Everything the story mentions, Dorothy sees in person. Everyone who promises to come back later on does so, and every magic item gets used exactly the number of times it can be. Each of Dorothy's companions becomes the king of their own kingdom, and while they all get knocked out when they approach the Wicked Witch of the West, this gives Dorothy the opportunity to prove her worth by taking the witch out on her own, without any help. I do take some issue with the pacing of the story, though, because it kind of meanders around even after the Wicked Witch of the West dies. Maybe I'm just more used to the movie version, but it feels like the story could have cut out the journey to the south entirely and moved the encounters from that section into the journeys to the Emerald City and to the west. As it is, there's a good third of the book that takes place after the story's climax. Overall, though, I enjoyed The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and it's a short and easy read that you can knock out in an afternoon and get for free through Project Gutenberg. So if you've ever wondered where the movie got all its ideas and which ideas they left out, go ahead and give it a read. The analysis. Each of Dorothy's companions struggles with the difference between self-identity and reality. The Scarecrow thinks of himself as a fool with stuffing for brains, but he constantly comes up with ideas and makes decisions that the rest of the group goes along with. The Tin Woodsman thinks that he doesn't care anymore because he lost his physical heart, but he cries when he accidentally steps on a beetle and is easily the most emotional. And the Cowardly Lion thinks he's a coward because of how afraid he is of things like monsters and dangerous ravines, but he never lets that fear stop him from defending the others or leaping first into a challenge. It's not always as cut and dried as it is in The Wizard of Oz, but there are a lot of people out there who struggle with this same sort of issue, where what they think they are capable of and what they are actually capable of are two very different things. Maybe it's because someone told you that you would never amount to anything, or maybe you see a task in front of you that looks impossible, and so, after putting in a token amount of effort, you shrug and give up. And while sometimes you're right and something is impossible for you, other times all you need is a little extra confidence, or someone who can push you in the right direction until you've already accomplished the thing you thought you could never do. Another big aspect of the novel is the Wizard of Oz as a leader. Oz describes himself as a bad wizard, but a good person, and apparently that's the perfect combination when it comes to good leadership. Because Oz appears powerful, he's able to protect his nation from evil and selfish rulers like the Wicked Witches. But because he's not actually powerful, he allows his citizens to go about their business and build the wealth of the kingdom in the process. And while this is a very simplified view of leadership, it's not a bad foundation to start from. A good leader should be someone who can defend their people from dangerous and harmful individuals, while otherwise staying out of everyone's business. The only problem is that everyone has different ideas on what counts as danger and harm, and which methods of defense are most effective. But this is a review of a century-old children's book, so let's leave it at that. We do also get an example of bad leadership, and that's from the Wicked Witch of the West. The witch has enslaved the population of the West, and she enslaves everyone who dares to visit her domain. Well, not everyone, but those she doesn't enslave, she kills. Because if something or someone is useless to the witch, it shouldn't exist. If a slave doesn't follow her orders, she beats them, and if she can't beat someone for some reason, she tricks them. Thus, a bad leader is someone who only cares about their own personal interests and treats other people as objects to be used, instead of fellow humans to be helped. And so, while a person like Oz might use smoke and mirrors and empty promises, he's still a good person at heart, and so he does what he can to help the people around him. And while the Wicked Witch is honest and direct, at least by comparison, she's an evil person at heart, and so she only helps herself. Thus, while leadership involves a lot of moving parts, fundamentally, a good leader has to be a good person. Thanks for joining me again for today's Threadbare review, and I hope I'll see you next time. Until then, please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and if you have a little extra money to spare, you can support me on Patreon. Link in the description.